Everyone, good afternoon. At this time, I would like to call to order the April 16th, 2026 regular board meeting of North County Transit. Before we begin, members of the public who may be viewing the meeting on the district's YouTube page, please note that in order to make a public comment during the meeting, you must connect to the meeting using the Zoom link provided on the agenda. In addition, you must also register by sending an email containing your name or phone number and the agenda item on which you wish to speak to clerk@nctd.org. So I'm going to go ahead and turn to Ms. Rodriguez, clerk of our board, to take a verbal roll call for attendance.
Thank you. Madam Chair Patel,
Here.
Vice Chair Sinella,
Here.
Board Member Martinez,
Here.
Board Member O'Hara, Board Member Garcia,
Here.
Board Member Joyce,
Present.
Board Member Desmond,
Here.
Board Member Edson, Board Member Contreras,
Present.
Board Member Lee.
Here.
This completes the roll.
Great. And Board Member Lee, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? All right, and I am now going to ask Ms. Rodriguez to provide a safety brief and review evacuation procedures.
Thank you. In case of an emergency, I will dial 911. In case of an evacuation, please take the stairs. Do not use the elevator. Once clear of the building, do not re-enter unless cleared to do so by emergency personnel. There are fire extinguishers and first aid kits on each floor of this building. There is also a portable defibrillator on the first floor, and staff on hand trained on CPR procedures if needed. This concludes my safety brief. And for the record, Board Member O'Hara has arrived at 2:02.
All right, thank you. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair. Board Agenda Item 16 was changed to other business on the regular board meeting agenda. Staff report and presentation was revised to clarify language in the process for receiving public input on the proposed fair ordinance amendments and to ensure consistency with applicable NCTD and SANDAC policies.
Great, thank you for that update. And moving on to public comment, do we have any general public comments today?
Madam Chair, yes, we did receive one general public comment, which was sent to the board prior to the meeting and is posted on the website. There are no public speakers today here.
All right, at this time, public registration to provide general public comment will end. Before we proceed, I have a couple of quick protocol items to share. First, I will ask board members to hold your comments and questions until after each agenda item has been presented. Second, when the time comes for board member questions or comments, if you could please raise your hand and wait until you're called upon to speak. And then turn on your microphone, make sure that we can hear you. That way we can make sure that folks that are listening online have the ability to hear us as well. And then lastly, when it's time to vote, Suhail will call a verbal vote. So the first item is the approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes for the regular board meeting of March 19th, 2026?
So moved, Edson.
Second, Sinella.
All right, motion by Edson, seconded by Sanella. Suhail, can we please call the vote?
Yes. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? On the motion of Board Member Edson, seconded by Vice Chair Sinella, to approve the minutes for the regular board meeting on March 19, 2026, motion passes.
Great, thank you. There are 14 items on the consent agenda for action today. Do we have any members of the public registered to speak on consent or request that any of the items be pulled?
No, Madam Chair.
All right, at this time, we are ending the public registration to speak on consent items. Do any board members wish to pull any items from consent?
I'll move to approve. Consent.
Okay.
Second by Edson.
Okay, motion by Desmond, seconded by Edson. If we could please take a verbal vote.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? On the motion of Board Member Desmond, seconded by Board Member Edson, to approve consent items 1 through 14, motion passes.
All right, we're moving right along. Item 15 is informational on grade separation prioritization in an effort to improve safety and enhance transit reliability. NCTD continues to coordinate with member agencies and regional partners to advance grade separation projects. Staff will present an overview of the prioritization approach, the resulting priority list, and ongoing efforts. Lillian Doherty, Director of Land Use Planning and Asset Control, and Yoni Tolakova, Director of Service Planning, and will present this item. So I'll go ahead and pass it off to both of you. And hopefully I got your last name right this time too. Okay, great.
Thank you, Chair and Board. Before we jump to our prioritization, we'd like to walk through the NCTD policies as well as the planning efforts that have informed our decision today. To begin, Board Policy 18 is the framework in which NCTD collaborates with local partners on rail safety and community enhancement projects, such as grade separation, pedestrian crossings, quiet zones, and other projects. Specifically, these are projects deemed priority projects by our local partners to improve community in terms of safety and mobility and other important reasons developed by the community. This board policy describes a set of agreements that support organized and efficient delivery of projects from the planning phase through to construction, operation, and the maintenance phases of these projects. The first initiative I'll talk about today is the SR 78 North County Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan, CMCP. In June of 2023, Caltrans and Sandag finalized this plan, which was intended to look at all modes of transportation, the needs and gaps along the corridor, in order to paint a picture of the vision of a multimodal system of what the future could look like along this corridor. It proposes and recommends a series of projects as well as bundles of projects in line with this vision. One of the types of projects that it identified was grade separation projects, which are depicted here. The dark blue bubbles represent those grade separation projects that were previously presented in prior regional plans. The three light blue bubbles indicate those which are new to the CMCP and proposed in that plan. In parallel with the CMCP, NCTD formed, pursuant to board approval, given in July of 2022, the Rail Safety and Community Enhancement Committee, or RSE as we like to describe it. The primary objective of this committee was to evaluate and discuss opportunities for community enhancement projects. 4 board members presided over this committee. Each of the cities, as well as the county, assigned representatives to identify priority projects along this corridor. 6 of the priority projects are grade separation projects. Each of those are listed here and depicted on this map. I'll turn it over to Yoni to take us through the rest of the presentation.
Awesome, thank you. So in 2024, NCTD finalized the Breeze Speed and Reliability Study. And what that was is it took the top 10 high priority routes for NCTD and it identifies ways to improve the speed and reliability specifically for those routes, whether that was through transit supportive infrastructure, technology, or other different policies that could be implemented. The study was informed really through robust technical engagement with the local jurisdictions. So that include city and county staff, planners, engineers, and the projects that were identified through this study to improve the speed and reliability of these routes were prioritized through 6 different categories. The first category is mobility benefits. So that includes riders served, total time savings, and the savings per rider. Equity and community benefits, which included disadvantaged communities served and Title VI considerations. Traffic and parking impacts, so a data analysis of traffic impacts for the proposed improvements. Regional and local consistency through the consultation of city and county staff with regional plans. Cost and jurisdictional coordination. So within this study, 6 grade separations were identified as providing the operational benefit to the highest utilized Breeze routes, with grade separations ranked in the order of priority based on those 6 categories that were previously mentioned.
Could you repeat the first 2? That went fast.
Oh, yes, in terms of the priorities. So Yes, the criteria were included mobility benefits, and that was rider served, total time savings, and time saving per rider. Then equity and community benefits, which included disadvantaged communities served and Title VI. Based on the criteria that has been mentioned, as well as consistency with the plans and studies that Lillian has mentioned, this is the priority list for grade separations that will provide the greatest benefit for NCTD services and riders. So this is the list, and then we also have a map that can be also reviewed, and I can go back and forth depending on which is easier. Okay, moving forward. There are a number of grants that can support the advancement of grade separations, such as the Rail Crossing Elimination Program. This is a federal program that provides the funding for planning and construction of highway rail and pathway rail grade crossing improvements with the emphasis for safety and the mobility of people and goods. The next Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFO, is expected this fall. Another opportunity is the Sustainable Transportation Planning Grants. This is through Caltrans. This has historically funded projects for grade separation studies, and the next call for projects is expected this fall as well. Generally, there are a number of federal and state earmarks that can be used for local projects such as this, some of which are smaller scale, but they can definitely still support grade separation planning studies or different phases of a grade separation. One important piece is that while either entity, whether NCTD or the local jurisdiction, can go after grants, this framework to jointly submit for grants together is typically done through an MOU. So we currently do have one in place with the county for Buena Creek, and we are very close to executing an MOU with the city of Vista. Along with ongoing efforts, as mentioned, we do have a study with the City of Vista, and will be also contributed with the MOU that's being executed. We have had studies being conducted for the Carlsbad Village Trench. We have applied for grants for Buena Creek, and we have an MOU with the county. We have had studies done previously for the City of Encinitas, and coming up is the Sandag Regional Rail Crossing Study. So this is anticipated to begin this summer and will take approximately a year to complete. The purpose of this study is to develop a rail crossing criteria and a prioritized list across the region based on safety, community health and access, traffic congestion, and overall transportation efficiency. Through this process, Sandag will engage with a number of stakeholders, including the local jurisdictions and the transit agencies. Now we're available for questions.
Great, thank you. Do we have any public comments for this item?
No, we do not.
All right, at this time, public registration to speak on this item will end. Are there any board member questions or comments regarding this item? Board Member Contreras?
First of all, thank you so much to staff and to the board. I know I brought up this topic of wanting to look at the grade separations for prioritization. It's not that I have this extreme bias towards the City of Vista, it's that I'm a user of the system, both rail, bus, and so I'm really thankful to see this prioritization list. We see that Buena Creek still ranks very highly. It's number 2. However, it is 0 for 3 right now, and maybe fourth time's the charm. I don't know. Can you give me a little bit of background? I know that in one of the previous board meetings, we moved forward with Buena Creek as our priority, but looking at this prioritization list, Vista ranks further up as number 1. So can you just remind me as to where we're at with that?
Yeah, we're still in the process for trying to acquire some study grant dollars for that. The way that I would sort of categorize this stack rank, and we've been talking about this for about a month now. We have a few that score very close to each other. but they're wildly different in the cost that would probably be attributed to, like if you take Buena Creek and Vista Village, for example, the cost to do Vista Village is extensively, in our estimation, more than Buena Creek would be. And so what we really want to do is just emphasize that from the standpoint and the standards that we have, this is the ranking. It doesn't mean that if we have a project that's ready to go and we're only able to sort of obtain X amount of dollars and we can knock out Buena Creek, I think our plan is to bring that back to the board and say, we have the money for that now. We want to do X grade separation because it costs X dollars and that's the amount of grant money we can get. I think we've always known that Vista Village, both from a traffic perspective, from a bus transfer perspective, and from a rail perspective, is extremely problematic most days for us.
Right.
And we've had great conversations with the city. I want to give a shout out to the city because they've done a good job of working with us to try to make solutions, but they're also working on their own road issues and pedestrian crossings, and sometimes those kind of meet us in the middle. But and we're still pushing forward with Buena Creek. Doesn't necessarily mean we can't shift target areas and try to do both. Buena Creek was kind of low-hanging fruit because there really isn't necessarily a lot of development right there, and we think the solution to that through the grade separation could be more development. So I think that's why it's continually sort of been on our list of achievable grant actions.
Yeah, and I haven't seen a cost estimate for the Buena Creek grade separation, and so I have a hard time hearing that it's going to be less than than Vista Village in the city of Vista, simply because we have a study and we know kind of ballpark figure where the city of Vista is, and the grade separation at Buena Creek is a extremely long grade separation as well. And as far as development goes, the county hasn't held up their side of the equation when it comes to preparing that area for development. There's, was $65 million to redo near the Buena Creek station to take it out of a flood zone and prepare it for more development. And that was years and years ago. I don't even know how much it would cost these days. So, I just have to push back on that because we don't have a study, whereas the city of Vista and Vista Village with NCTD, we do have a study. So, like I said, I'm not trying to deprioritize the Buena Creek station. I said that last time. However, when we're 0 for 3 and going for grant dollars, it's really concerning that it's kind of like insane to be doing the same thing over and over again and not getting the results that we want. So I think that the fourth time, if we don't get it, we need to start switching priorities to go to the number one in the prioritization list, which is Vista Village. Again, there's been several fatalities. I've been stuck on the bus there because of the train for in excess of 10 minutes, which is just not okay. That's the beginning of the route, and it totally throws off the entire route. And the number one route that we have in NCTD is the 303. And, it's 17% more used than the second route. And so when you start to add 10 minutes at the beginning of that route, and it's already takes over an hour to get just from Vista to Oceanside, it's a big problem. So, I really appreciate the work that went into this. I look forward to this larger regional study because then we can see, on the Sandag side where things are prioritized regionally. However, I would just really caution this board to take a deep look at reprioritizing the grade separations moving forward. And if we don't receive a grant again for Buena Creek, that we should move forward with the Vista Village because we have a study, we have an estimate. There's a whole transit center there. There's a lot of movement. All our modes of transportation come out of that, including our micro transit. So, that's, and what would that timeline look like? When should we hear back about the fourth time with Buena Creek?
It should be in the summer. And if I could just add on the discretionary grant strategy, it is a living document. And so right now Buena Creek is included in it. However, and the reason why Buena Creek is included is because it is the entity that we have an MOU with the local jurisdiction. We're close to getting an MOU signed with the city of Vista as well. Any city in our jurisdiction is welcome to begin the process to start an MOU with us to govern grant activities specifically. This prioritization list, I think, is intended to outline the operational benefits of grade separations throughout our service area. So when we are talking with Sandag about the greater regions prioritization, we will use that as, these are the operational
Fantastic.
benefits to us.
Yeah.
In terms of grants, right now, we have a MOU with the County of San Diego, and so if they want to seek grant funding, we will be a partner. And then when we have the MOU signed with the City of Vista, we didn't have an MOU signed with the City of Vista, but it was still their priority to do this grade separation. They asked us for support, and we gave them support because it made operational sense to us. So any other cities in our jurisdiction that would like to identify a grant opportunity, identify a particular grade separation, we're happy to support that as well.
Okay, so it sounds like if this is a priority for the county, then they could lead on trying to get grant funding for it, which is great, and I hope that they do that. Yeah, I mean, I think next summer, when we know whether or not this move forward, that we should really take a look at maybe switching priorities if we're 0 for 4. And then what I would say too is I'm excited about, being at the very end of trying to get this MOU with the City of Vista. I know it's critically important. And yeah, I thank you all so much for this work. I think it's very illuminating to the board. And then we see, Oceanside is there too. Nordall's in there. We've spoken about that. And emergency services, we want the Sprinter to go faster, more frequent, but we also know the gate downtime is going to be a critical issue. So the more funding we can get for grade separation, the better. And it just helps reconnect our communities and have safer crossings too. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Contreras. Anybody else? Board Member Edson?
Yes. So in the past, the railroad crossing elimination program through the FRA, have we applied for or been successful, or has anyone in our region been successful in obtaining those for grade separation?
NCTD has not, but Sandag and the City of Carlsbad did apply to that grant program for the Carlsbad Village Trench, and we're not successful.
Not successful. Okay, thanks.
Anyone else? I'm seeing Board Member O'Hara.
I just wanted to compliment staff. I was really excited reading this report. I think it shows a lot of future vision. None of these projects may even happen in my lifetime, honestly. But it's great to know that we've got a plan. We're looking forward. $1 billion of work here. It's not going to happen overnight. And it's good to know that you're picking priorities, you're working on it, and you're presenting to us and keeping them on the table rather than letting them fall off and have us wonder whatever happened to that project. So thanks for presenting this.
And actually, I'm sorry, I misspoke. My memory is short. We did, for the Buena Creek grade crossing, we did apply to railroad crossing elimination, and we're not successful.
Okay, and then Vice Chair Sanella.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo the thanks that my colleagues have already said. Great work. I think this is a great document to get us started and to look kind of into the future. Personally, I look at Nordal as being San Marcos. Maybe it's technically Escondido, so maybe Director Garcia and I could team up and maybe push it over the finish line there. But I actually ranked Nordal as number 3, so we were pretty close. And yours was way more scientific than mine. Was just kind of looking at the names and knowing a little bit about the areas. So that was pretty good. Just one question though, these are all pretty important, and I know the numbers are astronomical, and it's all dependent on funding and grant money. Is there a way? I'm not a grant expert by any, but what if we packaged them like multiple crossings together and tried to do a really big vision and try to knock out, if not all of them, maybe 3 or 4 at one time? Is that even possible?
It's definitely possible. I think whenever we apply for some of those grants, and I would say over the years, it's gotten a lot more stringent, and this is kind of the piece when we rank them, right? Like, we don't want to imply that for any reason one is a 3 or a 6, but when we go to Sandag, they're very specific on, does the city have the money to be able to match whatever the transit agency is trying to do? From a grant perspective, that's the first question they're going to ask us is like, okay, if we gave you $3 billion today, do you have your $1 billion local match? And the answer is probably not. Occasionally that can be problematic in the sense that now we have if pieces of it get filled and other pieces don't, where does that fall into the equation? And regionally, we have to respect a little bit where Sandag falls into the equation in terms of other projects that are in that queue. And we don't want to compete regionally for the same grant type, especially with FRA or FTA. That's occasionally, we've lost out on that. I think we strategically kind of say, okay, we're going to do this, and you do this, and you do this. From a regional perspective, that's certainly an option that we could do. I think it's tough to do that. I can only say from just coming back from DC that if we tried to do something like that, we would probably be the first project pushed off of the list, just because they're looking at these sort of very specific items that are ready to be constructed and can be done now. One of the continual kind of shots that we take as an industry when we go to DC is historically, we've approved a lot of grant money, and a lot of that money's still in the bank. So like, what the heck are you doing? Like, we gave you $10 million, $100 million 10 years ago, and 90 million of it's still in the bank, and 10 million of it went to consultants, right? Like, so where are you guys really at on these projects? And I think anytime you talk about stuff like grade separation, where there's all these different parties in the mix, be us and Sandag and the city, and you talk about fire life safety and all these things, like, something's bound to take a left turn, and then we have a problem on us. I don't think it's out of the realm for us to package it as one and kind of determine which ones we think we should throw in the mix. But occasionally that's a tough sell at the federal level, maybe not locally. But
No, I appreciate that insight. And if it doesn't make sense, I'm just thinking, just there's a lot of good reasons to do this grade separation, right, at most of these locations. And so if that was a possibility, I didn't know. And if it, as it pertains to any matches for Nordal, that is Escondido. Just wanted to make that clear.
The east side of the grade crossing is Escondido, and the west side is.
Board Member Martinez.
Thank you. I just had a clarifying question. So when you're asking for grants, typically it should be almost shovel-ready, isn't that correct?
Well, yes and no. I think there are larger projects at play that what you really have to have is notation in your grant request of where the local match is going to come from. And so you either have to specifically notate, especially on like a capital improvement grant, you have to notate at what percentage of level you currently have, what your liquidity is on the project now. If you're going to bond, you have to mark that in there, and how you have approval for those bonds. If you're going to debt service, who has approved your debt service. On smaller projects, you can kind of get away from some of those. And I think that's kind of the conversation we're having internally is, if we do apply for a few of these and one of them gets picked up, it may be a little easier to parcel them off because it's not such a huge financial commitment. If they did come out, I don't think they would, but if they did come out and say, hey, here's $2.5 billion, get to it, I think we would have a hard time justifying the local match in a grant request.
Yeah, and when you say get to it, though, would that, so all of these don't have a design? Do any of these, have any level of design done yet?
No, at this time, none of them are at the design phase. Just, we have concepts for Carlsbad Village as well as Vista Village. Those are at the concept phase. They need to move to the next 15% environmental clearance and then the full design package.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I'll just say thanks, for the list here and all the great work. And the county is just not sitting on their hands. And I got to tell you, we don't always agree on everything at the County Board of Supervisors, but this is our one transit stop rail stop in the unincorporated area of the county. And my colleagues and I are all on board to try to, get it done, get the realignment of the road and try to fix the traffic issues that we have and allow for more affordable housing near that transit stop. So the county's committed. I know it's difficult getting grants, but my colleagues and myself all support this, and it's very important to the county for this. So I appreciate the number 2 spot, which is actually in the sphere of Vista. So you got 2. Anyway. You got a lot of needs.
All right. Anyone else? Okay. Well, there is no vote required for this item. This is informational. And thank you for the presentation and for all the dialogue and questions from the board members. We are now moving on to other business. Staff will review public feedback received as part of the fair change study, and the board will consider making a recommendation to Sandag on a fair change proposal. As you may be aware, over the last few months, the region has been discussing possible updates to the regional fair ordinance. Mary Dover, our chief of staff, and Yun Park Lynch, our Chief Financial Officer, will present this item. I'll go ahead and pass it off to them.
Thank you, Chair, members of the board. As you know, NCTD, MTS, and Sandag have been conducting a regional fare change study. The last time the region conducted a fare change study was in 2019, prior to the launch of the Pronto fare system. Prior to that, most of the region's monthly fares haven't been raised since 2008. To keep up with rising costs, NCTD and MTS have explored raising fares to help manage inflation and the increasing costs of providing the lifeline services that we do. Today, I'll provide the board with an overview of the study, feedback we received from the public, and the resulting staff recommendation. With me is Yun Park Lynch, NCTD's CFO, and Yoni Chalakova, Director of Service Planning, who can assist in answering any questions the board may have. And we also have Sandag representatives as well for specific study questions. Beginning in FY28, NCTD is projected to have a funding deficit of $16 million, which grows to $23 million in FY29 and FY2030. Last April, during the board workshop, staff gave the board an overview of funding NCTD receives at the state and federal level and discussed the funding challenges ahead. The board heard presentations on NCTD's 5-year funding outlook during the FY26 budget process last May, with final adoption of these projections by the board in June. The funding sources we receive have limited flexibility, so NCTD is exploring strategies to free up local funding for operating expenses. These strategies are in a variety of ways. In some cases, NCTD can shift capital resources to cover operating expenses by using reserves to provide the non-federal match on capital projects. As Sean mentioned, most federal funding requires a non-federal match, which NCTD uses state and local funding for. NCTD's reserves are limited, and this is seen as a short-term stopgap solution rather than a long-term fix. Staff is also working diligently to federalize as many expenses as possible to free up those local dollars for operating expenses. NCTD has also begun the process to redevelop 11 of its rail stations, which provide ground lease revenue. Although this solution does provide long-term sustainable funding, it's only anticipated to generate modest revenues and will not cover the entirety of the funding gap. Since Sean's arrival at NCTD, staff has taken a closer look at discretionary spending and has reduced reliance on outside contracts. In FY26, we reduced our operating budget by $10 million to manage some of those funding constraints. Where feasible, NCTD is completing work with in-house resources and shifting priorities to manage costs. The final two strategies that partners within the industry utilize include looking at service levels in comparison to fare prices. NCTD's planning department has started the process of assessing existing routes, trips, frequencies, and span of service to identify underperforming services and make adjustments where necessary. In some cases, the board has authorized modifications to routes and services to better align with traveler patterns in an effort to drive ridership. NCTD has taken available measures to prevent the elimination of services, and although is still facing a potential deficit. MTS is facing an even larger funding deficit and is exploring similar strategies to mitigate potential service cuts. Another tool at the region's disposal is to evaluate increasing fares. As I mentioned, the last time the region raised its prices for most monthly passes was in 2008. In 2011, NCTD's board did vote to lower coaster monthly fares, which were then reinstated to the 2008 levels in 2019. Since then, if NCTD were to have kept up with inflation, NCTD's fares should be between 16% and 33% higher than what staff is proposing today. With decreasing projections in sales tax revenues in the coming years and Transnet being largely oversubscribed, the region came together to conduct a fare change study, which endeavored to determine how much revenue the agencies could potentially generate from a fare increase, if any ridership would be lost, and gather public feedback on the proposed changes. The region started this effort last summer, and Sandag started gathering demographic data and modeling potential scenarios. During phase 1 of outreach, we talked to the public about their priorities, how they viewed the existing fares, if they'd be willing to pay a little bit more to maintain and lessen some of the service impacts that we may be facing. We also looked at how our regional fares compared to the fares of our peer agencies throughout California and nationally. Following this initial phase, NCTD's Performance Administration and Finance Committee received an update on the initial survey results in December and Sean has provided updates in numerous CEO updates to the board to keep the board informed. We took that initial public feedback and began finalizing 2 scenarios to model and begin conversation with the public in phase 2 of outreach. We looked at the potential impacts to ridership and anticipated revenue generation for each of the scenarios. In March, NCTD conducted robust outreach to talk to the public about the 2 scenarios, explain the process for changing our fares, and what each scenario might mean for service levels. And now, we're discussing the results of the outreach with our boards and recommending approval of the proposed fare change to Sandag's Transportation Committee. As part of the data gathering phase, NCTD, MTS, and Sandag looked at the fares of peer agencies. The region's fares were largely in line or lower than our peers, particularly on the commuter rail side. Just for comparison, NCTD's current one-way fare for transit services, which we categorize as Breeze and Sprinter, is $250, lower than the fares of our peers in larger cities, and coaster fare for the 3 zones is $650. On Metrolink, a one-way fare of a similar distance to the 3 zones on coaster is $14, while a day pass is $15 and a monthly pass is $350. Caltrain in the Bay Area charges $850 for a one-way of a comparable distance, with the day pass costing $17 and a monthly pass $204. After gathering initial public feedback and cross-referencing peer agency fares, the region developed 2 scenarios to discuss with the public. Package A, in general, proposed a more modest increase to Package B, and therefore would generate less revenue for NCTD compared to Package B. Package A proposed a smaller increase in adult monthly passes, but a higher increase in SDM, which stands for Senior, Disabled, and Medicare users. With any fare increase, we can expect to lose some riders. Package A's projected ridership loss is lower than Package B because the increase is less. The goal in the development of each package was to strike a balance between generating revenue for the agency while managing costs for customers and maintaining the cost-effective nature of transit in comparison to other forms of transportation. So I'll walk through what Package A and Package B were and the conversations that we had with the public and the resulting public outreach. So Package A proposed raising the Breeze and Sprinter fare from $250 to $3 and $350 for Package B. Flex was proposed to stay the same at $5. In all scenarios, coasters were proposed to collapse the zone structure of the coaster to make it a little bit easier for our customers and easier for the conductors that are checking tickets on the coaster. So you could just show up at a TVM, purchase a ticket, and then ride. In Package A, it was proposed to stay at the Zone 3 fare, and in Package B, it was proposed to be raised to $8. On the SDM side, in Package A and Package B, the Breeze and Sprinter fare was intended to be $150, which is largely generally half of what the adult fare is. But occasionally we do give a greater discount for the SDM fares in certain scenarios. Flex was proposed to stay the same, half of $5, which is $250, and then the coaster zone was proposed to be the 3 zone fare for Package A, $325, and then raised to $4 in Package B. For the day and monthly passes, the regional day pass and monthly pass includes Sprinter, Breeze, MTS Bus, MTS Trolley, and MTS Rapid. So this is a regional fare product. The regional fare was proposed to be changed from $6 to $7 and $8 in Package B. The premium regional day pass, which includes everything that the regional does, but it also includes Flex and some other MTS services that are similar to our Flex, was proposed to be changed from 12 to 14 in Package A, 16 in Package B. And then the coaster regional, which includes everything except the paratransit services in the region, was proposed to be kept the same in Package A, the 3 zone fare of $15, or raised to $20 in Package B. Very similar increases, keeping that half level largely for the regional, premium regional, and coaster regional for Packages A and B. For the monthly passes, the regional monthly pass was proposed to be raised from $72 to $90 in Package A and $100 in Package B. Premium regional from $100 to $125 in Package A and $140 in Package B. The coaster regional was proposed to be raised modestly from the Zone 3 fare of $182 to $185, and in Package B, $196. NCTD also provides a Sprinter Breeze only monthly pass to provide an option for riders that may not be traveling into San Diego and wouldn't necessarily need to use that regional fare product. So for the Sprinter Breeze pass, It's currently $59. It was proposed to be raised to $65 in package A and $70 in package B. On the monthly pass side for the SDM users, we did provide different scenarios to try to see and talk to the public about whether the public would be interested in paying a higher adult monthly fare to allow for a greater discount for the seniors. So in package A, the regional fare is proposed to be only $30, whereas package B is actually proposed to be a steeper discount for SDM users at $28. Premium regional is similar, $42 in package A and $39 in package B. Sprinter Breeze is also similar, $23 and $20 in package B. So after we developed these two scenarios, we did begin phase 2 of public outreach. NCTD and MTS talked to the public through community outreach in both English and Spanish and solicited feedback in the form of both an online and paper survey. NCTD hosted 12 in-person outreach events at our busiest transit centers and stations and held 2 virtual workshops to solicit feedback. Staff also rode the Coaster, Sprinter, and Breeze 17 times to gather feedback from riders on those highest ridership trips. We posted on our social media channels and ensured that frontline staff were educated on the proposed changes. Staff were given business cards with a QR code that directed to NCTD's Fare Change website in case riders had real-time questions about the fare change. The survey closed on March 31st. We analyzed the responses to help inform the staff recommendation, so I'll run through the survey results now. So we got a good modal split from the top 3 modes that NCTD provides. We had a lot of Coaster, Sprinter, and Breeze respondents. We did also see a high propensity of riders who rode frequently on the service, 5 to 7 days per week. The most popular payment method among survey respondents was a Pronto app or card. We also had some that paid with cash, got a paper ticket, or used the contactless credit card tap payments. And the most common fare type was the monthly pass, although we did see folks that bought one-way passes and day passes as well. The age range was relatively even among a lot of demographics, with the highest being 25 to 34. And then household income, we did see a relatively even split with a high propensity of folks that would prefer not to say. For race or ethnicity, we did compare and we really strived to get survey responses that matched the communities we serve. And so as you can see here, that's pretty consistent with the community of North County. When we talked about the specifics of how fare prices interact with service, we did see that most survey respondents said they would prefer higher fares to lessen the impacts to their service levels. And we also saw most of the survey respondents say that they would favor scenario B. SANDAG is the administrator of the Regional Fare Ordinance, and as such, NCTD, MTS, and SANDAG activities regarding public participation in the fare change process has been consistent with SANDAG board policy and the Fare Ordinance. SANDAG's board policy also contemplates periodic reviews of the regional fares to ensure consistency with cost indicators and inflationary pressures on the costs of providing these lifeline services. So after gathering the public feedback, consistent with SANDAG board policy, and then taking into that consideration public feedback and also feedback that we received from NCTD and MTS's boards and committees, the region is recommending a phased approach to increasing fares. For context, this approach was approved by MTS's board this morning with these fares outlined. Yeah.
No, this is, yeah. So once we received all the feedback on A or B, what we did is we came back through the region and came with a phased approach. And I can say, in the history of my having to do fare increases, this is usually the most palatable, where we agree to a potentially static fare increase in one year and a slight increase in the following year, and that's what this is. So this approach isn't A or B. This approach is one phased approach, where in fall of 26, the rates will be what you see in the darker blue column there, and then in fall of 27, they will move to the lighter blue column.
So yeah, phase 1 is largely consistent with scenario A. However, there are some changes which I will call out. Phase 2 is a little bit less than the increases proposed in scenario B. A phased approach does help stabilize revenues for both NCTD and MTS while managing the potential impacts to riders. If this proposal is approved by Sandag's Transportation Committee, the first phase could begin this fall, with phase 2 beginning in fall 2027. So phase 1 is largely consistent with package A. Phase 2 has a little bit less of an increase. The Breeze and Sprinter fare would be $3.25, Flex would raise to $6.50, and Coaster would be $7. And SDM prices are consistent with that half-price discount. In addition to these core services, NCTD also provides complimentary paratransit service within a defined zone in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA. Paratransit is a door-to-door, on-demand service and provides a valuable resource to the community. However, paratransit does cost per passenger 10 times more than our fixed route services. To help manage the expenses related to providing this on-demand service, the Federal Transit Administration allows agencies to charge up to twice the adult fare. As such, NCTD proposes the same level of increase to lift ADA paratransit fares in line with federal guidance. For the day and monthly passes, similarly, the day passes and the monthly passes are consistent with package A in phase 1. However, the regional pass is decreased to $85, and in phase 2, it's $95. In phase 2, the day passes for the regional pass will stay at $7 in phase 2. Premium regional will increase to $16, and the coastal regional will increase to $17. The regional adult monthly pass, as I mentioned, will increase to $95 in fall 2027. Premium regional will increase to $140 in fall 2027. The coaster will increase from $185 to $190 in phase 2. Sprinter Breeze will increase to $70 in phase 2. We wanted to keep the larger than 0.5% discount for the SDM fares throughout the day and monthly passes, and that's seen reflected here. In the first year of the fare increase, NCTD can expect to generate an additional $600,000. Ridership loss is anticipated to be approximately 140,000, which accounts for 1.69% of total system-wide ridership. Phase 2 is expected to generate an additional 1.2 million annually, with an anticipated ridership loss of approximately 235,000 riders, or 2.83% of total system-wide ridership. Over the past 3 years, NCTD has seen average year-over-year ridership increases of approximately 13% per year. This is likely attributed to shifting travel patterns and return to work policies. In recent months, increases are likely related to the increased costs of car ownership, including insurance costs, tariffs, and high gas prices. We do expect the trend of year-over-year increases in ridership to continue, even in spite of these fare increases, and ridership is expected to rebound once riders become comfortable with the new fares. As I mentioned, MTS held their Board of Directors meeting this morning, in which the board did recommend that Sandag's Transportation Committee approve the fare proposal. Similarly, NCTD staff is recommending that the NCTD board recommend that Sandag's Transportation Committee approve the changes to the regional fare ordinance, which would include raising the fares as outlined in Attachment A to this agenda item. NCTD is also suggesting other cleanup changes to improve consistency throughout the fare ordinance. The text changes to the ordinance include minor terminology updates, minor juror, college, and group pass updates, minor Pronto system language updates, experimental fares, senior SDM and youth eligibility language, and adding language on microtransit services. If the board decides to make a recommendation that Sandag's Transportation Committee approve the proposed changes, including the fares as outlined in Attachment A, the Sandag Transportation Committee will conduct their first reading of the proposed changes to the fare ordinance at their meeting on May 15th. A second reading will be conducted on June 12th, at which time the Transportation Committee can determine if they would like to approve the proposed fare changes. If approved, NCTD staff will then amend our bus, paratransit, and specialized transportation services fare management policy to reflect the approved changes. So today, staff is recommending that the NCTD Board of Directors forward a recommendation to Sandag to make the changes to the Regional Comprehensive Fare Ordinance as outlined in Attachment A. And we are available for any questions.
Great, thank you. Do we have any public comments for this item?
There are no in-person public speakers today. However, there were 2 public comments received for this item. And that was sent to the board prior to the meeting and posted on the website.
All right, great. At this time, public registration to speak on this item will end. I'll look to my colleagues to see if we have anyone. I see Board Member Edson.
Yes, for the purpose of discussion, I'd like to go ahead and move approval of this item per staff's recommendation. I really appreciate the amount of time and effort that has gone into this fair study. I also really appreciate staff's response to the feedback from the executive committee. We were presented at executive A or B, and we talked about something that was more of a hybrid, and that's what we're getting here. And the fact that MTS's board is also online with this, I think makes it a winner for everyone. I plan to be at the Transportation Committee meeting next week. And I think it's next week. This week, sorry. and state our support, hopefully, if the board sees it that way. So thank you again for all of the work. And I know this has been a tremendous effort by many people. The amount of outreach was excellent. I mean, the reports were excellent. Thank you so much.
Vice Chair Sanella?
Yeah, just to keep, I agree with everything that Director Edson just said, and to keep the, I guess, the protocol, I'll go ahead and second the motion. I've had the opportunity to see the presentation now twice, the PAF committee and the executive committee, and I've watched our feedback get incorporated, and I've watched it evolve over the months. And again, just to echo what was just said, thank you for all the hard work to everybody involved. I know it's changed over time, but I also, I'm seconding it so we can continue the conversation, but I know that not all of my colleagues have had a chance to see it, maybe even once. And so certainly this isn't, I'm not saying we end the conversation. I'm just wanting to make sure that we have a second though for the motion.
Thank you. Anybody else, comments, questions? Okay. Board Member Contreras, is it okay if I go to Board Member Joyce first? Okay, and then I'll come to you. Okay.
Thanks. Can we go back to slide 1? Yeah, so we're talking about the funding gap. So this is estimated to bring in, sorry, now I got to bounce between the two. A revenue increase of about $649,000 in year 1 and 1.2 in year 2. But we're looking at $16 million shortfall. So I'm just asking, I guess, generally, how much can we cover by shifting those funds around that was referenced? What do we do about the other 15 million?
Yeah, I very much appreciate that question. In fact, we were in Sacramento Wednesday before we went to DC on Friday. And trying to be thoughtful about how I say this. We're getting a little pushback from some of our state electeds on their maintaining focus on capital projects within the rail corridor versus being able to move funding to continue operations. We received about a little under $110 million for SB 125. Out of our control, those were largely put toward the local match for rail capital projects in the region, I think with the anticipation that we were going to be liquid through 2030. That money was really designated by the state for continuity of operations while we were trying to find another funding source for transit at the statewide level. In fact, a lot of the conversation we had in Sacramento was specific to how do we continue SB 125 so it's not necessarily a one-time thing for a 2-year process. We really need some investment in that. The difficult part for us is it's not that those capital projects lack importance, but to me, and this is just from my seat, service on the street is far more important than any large capital project we could ever do. Unless that capital project is going to generate tens of millions of revenue for us or is going to double our ridership, we have to get back to core services. And I think that's been our approach for years. And I think you see that reflected in the budget we brought, especially last year where we were 10 million. I mean, I think we're the only agency in the region that brought a lower budget back to the board than they had before. The 16 million really depends on color of money. And that's pretty universal in the government sphere, that we're trying to figure out how to manage our federal funding, what we can use those things for versus what we can use local dollars for. And I'll give Yoon and her team a ton of credit. That is literally how we've been doing the budget for the last decade. That's how this organization has survived, has really been on the ability of our financial team to be able to move the color of money around. What we're running into now is a lack of money sort of in the peripheral that would allow us to do that without pulling from reserves. And our reserves are a little bit under about 100 million right now. What we went to DC and had a conversation about this week specifically is we spend about $8 million a year in safety and security. So we have a contract with the sheriff's office, and we have about another $2.5 million that we use for 24/7 security at our transit centers. We've asked that we can use federal funding for that, so we can free up local dollars for local operating assistance. And our rationale behind that was every time we go to the federal government, their projects, whether that's a CIG, whether that's federal funding, capital improvement grants, anytime we want to do a project that's rail or bus related, we have to put in our safety and security component to it. So we've said that because that's at the request of the federal government, can we use federal dollars to sort of manage safety and security so we can free up local money for services? And I think there's a big appetite for that. I mean, we went to quite a few offices, saw a lot of, on both sides of the aisle. They all seemed very open to that. I would tell you that doesn't necessarily solve our problem. If we're able to flip the SB 125 money, that helps us for 2 or 3 years while we're trying to find an applicable solution to cover the gap. There are a lot of good options on the table. We've talked to Sandag and MTS about that we're going to take to Sacramento. Once we sort of hammer down what we think those priorities are, we're going to need board support for that to come with us to Sacramento and walk through some of those changes. But the 16 million could be proportionally different between capital and operating depending on what color of money we get in the next budget cycle. I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, I can clarify on a few items.
Yeah, I mean, I would just, so I guess my point is, like, just in context of this decision, it's kind of like we have an axe over our head, but this is like putting a straw of hay over top of it, you know? It's like not really, I mean, I get it helps, but it's such a small part of the problem. So I just am kind of flagging that for my colleagues, that when we make this decision, or I guess we're not making this decision, we make this recommendation to somebody else to make the decision, that's just an important context to, I think, keep in mind.
Yeah, and I would note too, I really appreciated your comments at the TC meeting. I think one of the questions that was directly asked during the Transportation Committee meeting was, hey, does this solve your problem? And I don't feel like that answer was very strongly given until I had the opportunity to kind of chime in. And I think my comment on that was, no, this is more of a piece of the agency not raising its fares over the past 15 years. And I think MTS is in the same boat. It doesn't necessarily, I don't want to give anyone the impression that this solves our deficit issue. It's not. It's just one tool in the toolbox to help us sort of right size where we should be. I can only say personally, I don't think I've ever seen a region not raise fares in 15 years. That's different.
We're special.
Yeah, it's different. Now, and I sort of look back to 2010-ish, and I try to remember like how many agencies were at 250 back then, and not a lot. So I think we were ahead of the game then, and then just sort of didn't make those decisions as we went along. So,
so can I ask about the annual ridership loss? How much would that cost us? So I assume that the amount that you give us is what comes out net, right? So we would have ridership loss. How much does the ridership loss cost? And then I guess for year one, and then how much are we gaining from the amount add?
Yeah, so Sandag prepared a model, their principal economist prepared a model for us. It really just did net revenue.
Oh, they didn't give us the numbers?
I'm not good at quick math, but if we
Okay.
just do, I don't know, 250 times 140, I would assume that would probably be the net decrease in revenue from the ridership loss, but it is net.
Okay. I just would like to look behind that curtain. Um, Is there any talk about collapsing two of the three regionals, the regional, the premium, and the coaster, plus all the other stuff? It seems, for one, I love that we're collapsing the other regionals, the three regions, like, so I should have started with that. Like, simplify, 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 that's great. Can we go further in collapsing either like premium regional with coaster and just making it like a regional, or, I mean, is there a big reason why we can't do that? Was that talked about at all?
We did discuss that. Part of the rationale behind the different zones are everyone has a different percentage of the revenue generated off of that pass. So when we talk about like a premium regional, MTS gets a cut of that regional pass. We get a cut of that regional pass because it opens up all the modes. On things that are specific to us, like Sprinter Breeze, that's our direct funding. Coaster, similarly, with the exception of the regional zone, because it has MTS trolley and bus in there.
And yeah, if I could just add, so the regional pass is generally the region's core services. So it has Sprinter Breeze, MTS bus, MTS trolley, and then MTS rapid service. The premium regional is really intended to capture those demand response, those, sorry, not demand response, deviated fixed route services like our Flex that goes up into Camp Pendleton, MTS's Rapid Express and MTS's Rural that go very long distances. And so those are more expensive services, and so that's why we do have another tier of premium regional pass. One of the driving factors in collapsing the coaster zones is that we actually saw that the majority of our riders are going from zone 1 to zone 3, and so they're already paying that zone 3 fare. And if we can just make it that much easier for the customer, when a rider comes to one of the customer service offices and talks to a customer service representative about their monthly pass and trying to purchase one, we do talk to them about what do you typically ride, and we put them in the most appropriate pass. If we have coaster riders, they're going in the coaster regional because that's the one that's most applicable. But it's related to the services that provided and the costs associated with providing those services.
Yeah, I would say interestingly enough too, fare capping has had an impact on that, as it should have. The intention for fare capping was to really determine whether or not somebody needed a monthly pass. And what we saw was a decrease in revenue almost right out the gate. And we had the same thing where we had the same system in Washington that we had here with Pronto. And we saw the same thing when we put it in, was a decrease in revenue because riders were not utilizing the system enough to warrant a monthly pass, but the only thing that was available to them was a monthly pass. So we've seen a little bit of a revenue decrease over the years since implementation because riders are tapping locally on service to only ride the amount of times they need and not forced into buying a monthly.
Okay. Does the income presented on income slide, whatever that one is, 11, does that match our rider profile? Let's just prefer not to say is there. Does that match our rider profile?
Yes, so we did look at, we broke it down based on what our definitions are for low income threshold, and we did find that low income populations were overrepresented compared to our service area. So we have about,
Using AMI? I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt. Just
Yes.
making sure we're talking the same language.
yeah, so we used the same definition that we have for Title VI. So we followed that definition and looked at what our service area average is, which is 22% low income, and we had about 40% represented.
Okay.
Yoni, do you want to talk a little bit about what our Title VI requirement is and what Title VI is?
Yes, and one additional point I'll add, we did ask about household quantity, so we did also include that to make sure that we had the exact definition. Yes. So for Title VI, we use the 200% of the, essentially the poverty line to define low income threshold. It is based on household size as well. We use Title VI in our major service change process. So when we make any major service changes, we take a look at whether or not it impacts low income populations disproportionately more. Our threshold for major service changes in Title VI is 10%. So if it impacts more than 10%, then it is considered a burden. So in this case, we wanted to make sure that we have an overrepresentation specifically of low income so that that feedback is incorporated.
Thank you.
Okay, Board Member Edson and then Board Member Contreras. Anybody else want to raise hands and get in line? Okay, great.
So in response to your first question or comment, Director Joyce, I just wanted to point out that the fair revenue represents approximately 7% of NCTD's operating budget. So I don't think that any fair adjustment was meant to conquer all, so that we do have to look in these other areas. And this was a question I raised actually at either executive or PATH. So I hear what you're saying. I was there too when I first read it.
All right, Board Member Contreras.
Yeah, I also want to say I'm really thankful to see the collapsed zones. And just a question on that, you know, we're anticipating to build another platform. Would that convention center platform be part of Zone 3? I mean, I guess it's all going to be a flat rate, so.
Yeah, I think the thing we heard the most, and interestingly enough, was I here like 4 days. I went and told Mary we got to collapse the coaster zones. I've never seen anything like that. And it would. I think our goal is barring anything that would take us to the north of Camp Pendleton, our fares would be one zone all the way throughout San Diego County.
Okay. Yeah, fantastic. I see that NCTD Plus, our microtransit, is not listed on here. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so it's still currently in its pilot phase, so we have the ability to manage that. Actually, one of the bullet points that Sandag put in is that anything demand response related, with the exception of ADA, well, ADA would sort of fall in that too, but anything demand response related would be at the discretion of the agency. We very much
see.
appreciate that. In fact, NCTD Plus was in the premium zone with Flex
Yeah.
at $5, and I think a few months in, we made the change to drop it down to the current price to see if it changed the ridership structure, and it did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for NCTD Plus, we don't have an SDM discount, do we?
No, we do not.
Okay, yeah, that's a
Yeah.
complaint I get a lot, just FYI, from folks, especially from our seniors, that there's no discount on there. What is an experimental fare? What's that mean? That was mentioned.
Yeah, we occasionally do pilot fares. So we tried out a 5-10 pack on Coaster that was considered experimental or a pilot fare. We're actually proposing to discontinue that. We didn't see the adoption that we expected. So that's kind of what they're getting at with experimental.
Okay. And ultimately, the Transportation Committee is going to be making this recommendation. Would that happen regardless of us making a recommendation to them?
Yeah, it does. And I would say, I don't like that. This is the one place I've worked where the transit agency doesn't necessarily have a lot of control over the outcomes that are related to regional items. And this is another
Right.
one that if MTS's board and our board voted no, TC could still vote yes, and these changes would occur.
Right.
In this case, I think there was a very concerted effort by Sandag to make sure that the agencies were heard and make changes were available. And I give Mario and the team some credit on that, that how we got to this phased approach was really from NCTD's group and MTS's group saying like, hey, this phase B, people like it. They like it for a reason because it holds down the SDM cost. But to a lot of other folks' points, that's a lot for someone to swallow right out the gate to go to a 350. So how do we find a phased approach in the middle? I feel very comfortable about how the process went on this one, but I would say that it doesn't take away from my view that we occasionally don't have control of some things here at the agency that we should have control of. And so, yes, TC would have the final say on this.
So, you know, in light of that, I really see our recommendation as being a statement of our values. And I think that the current motion that we have, while good, I think is missing a certain component, and I'll explain. You know, this slide 11, I was gonna call that up because, or yeah, whichever one we were just looking at. Perfect, yes. So, you know, when we look at less than $14.9 thousand a year, it can't really necessarily be accounted as just our youth opportunity pass. I mean, these are a lot of our customers, right? And this is something that I've underscored here and at Sandag, that we absolutely need to create a low-income fare discount program for this region. And I think that with this recommendation, again, being part of our values, Sandag is the one that's going to drive that type of program. And I really do think that the motion, I could support it if it would, if the maker of the motion and the seconder of the motion would approve a friendly amendment that we advocate for a low-income fare discount program to be done at the Sandag level. Is that clear? Does everybody understand what I'm talking about? Okay, I just want to make sure that there's an understanding. You know, I really do see it absolutely necessary, and I don't know what that level of low income threshold would be. Also, I understand that there's barriers to even verifying the youth opportunity pass, and this is just, or disability, right? And senior and all these things, and that, you know, having to verify creates a barrier. But I think not having a program in place for the region is not a good thing. You know, I've said it many times that for someone making $15,000 or less a year, this fare increase ends up being a significant percentage of their overall income that gets lost. And their folks are already being squeezed so tightly. So I would support a motion that has language that we recommend staff's, you know, the phased approach, but that we also recommend that Sandag creates a low-income fare discount program. So that's pretty much all I have to say about that, but that's the only way that I could support this motion. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, I saw Board Member Edson, then Board Member Joyce, then Board Member O'Hara, but since you haven't shared Board Member O'Hara, is it, I'll let you go first.
Follow-up question on it. So I feel like that's a separate question all into itself. And today we're being asked to look at the policy in front of us, not an additional piece to it. I don't know if you agree with that, because there's a whole discussion there as to what offsets the money. We've looked at a number here, 1.2, 600,000 and 1.2. And to get back to those numbers, which is kind of what this is about, if we were to go and say, okay, we're going to give a discount, well, then to get back to 1.2, where does the rest of the money come from? And so I feel like we're kind of introducing something that really isn't on the docket with that extra add-on. But I think it'd be great to entertain it at a future meeting or a future agenda. I'm just asking, and I'm asking for confirmation as to whether we could add that, or whether it makes sense to or not at a different time.
I'll look to our council.
I do think it's a good idea, just whether it fits now.
The proposal that was made, or the friendly amendment that was made, was just to advocate for this type of fare program. So I don't think it changes the overall recommendation and the overall structure of the phased approach, because it's just looking for advocacy.
All right, Board Member Joyce and then Board Member Edson.
Yeah, I fully support that. I mean, I think, for one, I'm just going to rail a little bit. This is being the first time some of us have seen it. It is strange that we're like seeing this for the first time and moving to make a recommendation. So I'll just say that's a little strange, but and I know that some of this is just timing, because it feels like all this was getting put together right up until now. But in line with our CEO's comments that we're not even the ones controlling it, we could say and recommend what we really think and feel about this. And because we're not given all the information to make the actual final decision anyway, I think it's best to say what this board fully supports. So I'd be on the same line that we would want to advocate to make sure that the folks that rely on this to get to work and need it the most are not exited from our service because it's chipping away at their already low incomes.
Thanks, Board Member Joyce. Board Member Edson?
Yes, I hear what you're saying. I sympathize. I have a lot of compassion for people who are struggling financially right now. I also understand the process and don't believe that if we said, Sandag, you know, you need to do this or we're not going to do that, that it would get us to the outcome that you're looking for. I also think that the way, you know, just over the years, looking at the way things work, that if we move forward with staff's recommendation, and then, but with perhaps an ask for them to study, looking at, you know, a way to get to a low-income fair discount, whether that's seeking some funding from state level or federal level or something like that for that. I think that it would honor staff's recommendation, all the work that's been done, getting all the agencies to work together to come up with something that is palatable, but also let them know that we're interested in pursuing this other avenue and encouraging them to do so. Is that something you would be comfortable with?
Yes, if that came, I need that to be explicitly in the motion language, or else I cannot support it. So, you know, I'm willing to make a substitute motion that would include this language of a recommendation, but I'll wait till my turn and see if this is something that you want to explicitly put in the motion.
I would be happy to move forward staff's recommendation with the addition of recommending that Sandag pursue a study to look at ways for a low-income fair discount program, to find funding for a low-income fair discount program. Does that work?
I would support that. I think it's absolutely necessary for us to put that value down, and I'm advocating on the Sandag side for a low fare program discount. So I think it's just helpful, if everybody's okay with that, that we can send a resounding message to TC, to Sandag, that this is our value and we want to stick with it.
Yes, I hear Mr. Donaghy wants to say something, and then I need to look to the seconder of the motion to ask if it's accepted.
Yeah, I would just say that's not the first time Sandag has heard that comment. There are conversations happening behind the scenes about what the structure of that would look like, what it may mean to, one of the last conversations that took place, and this was a few months back related to that topic, was how many of our current everyday riders would fall into that category, and what would it decrease from the potential of an increase? Like, does it wash itself out? Where does it really come into when we talk about the fare issue? And I would say, to your earlier point, I got to give staff a lot of credit. We were getting changes on this up until Friday or Monday, Mary. I mean, we really had to do an errata and change a few things because there was a lot happening behind the scenes at the last minute at the end of last week. And, you know, I think that's been part of my frustration occasionally with where I think the region sees North County as a whole, and North County Transit as it fits into that is, you know, we should really be driving some of those conversations in real time. And I definitely agree with your comment on that, so thank you. But that conversation is happening behind the scenes. I don't think it would be an issue for us to sort of codify that into some type of a continuation of that work. We need to see more on that front. When can you present on it? Is that something that Sandag has an appetite for? If yes, no, you need to be very public about that because there are a lot of people that are affected.
If I might, through the chair. So I advocated for YOP for years. And YOP happened. it just takes that advocacy and consistency to push that and, you know, get support behind it. But these things aren't necessarily built in a day, and whether we'd like them to be or not.
Board Member Contreras?
Yeah, just a quick comment. You know, I mean, in the time that I've been on NCTD, that I didn't even see this room because it was pandemic time. We have never discussed a low income fare discount program. So that's why I'm advocating so hard right now, because anytime that we can add that language, it is in the public record, it is submitted to the folks that need to hear it at Sandag and Transportation Committee. And when we are able to advocate using the same language on the Sandag side, it just makes it that much more powerful. So I really appreciate taking in and adopting that language. And I understand that it's very difficult. And so that's why I think, you know, it is important to start a study on it. But the fact that we don't have a study, I don't care how many things are happening behind closed doors. If it's not happening in the public, it's not happening to me. So I do appreciate that. Hopefully this gets rolled into this motion. So thank you so much.
Okay, Board Member Lee. Yeah.
Thank you, and that's loud. I'm happy to support the motion as presented with the changes that are proposed as well. I think there's a reality here that we're all going to have to sort of recognize from a fiscal standpoint. I think, Sean, you pointed out, I was going to ask earlier, not seeing it in the presentation and having not been in the previous conversations about the updates to fares, but last time they were changed were 15 years?
Yeah, we changed them in 2008, 2009, and then post-recession, we actually lowered our coaster fares and then reinstated back to the original fare in 2019.
And I think that's a marker of the challenge that we face from a financial stability standpoint, because structurally, having not kept fares with CPI and the reality that things will continue to change means that now we're playing a bit of catch up. And as Councilmember Joyce pointed out, that also means that even a fare increase, as you can consider this modest or significant, depending on how you look at it, isn't going to necessarily solve our structural challenges at the moment. So I do think that's where starting the advocacy for the long-term idea of evaluating for some kind of low-income fare discount it's going to become a necessity. This is just 2 phases of an increase. I would not be shocked if in a couple of years it's going to necessitate another round of discussions at every agency to continue meeting the quote-unquote fiscal cliffs that we've talked about. So I do think this helps to strike that balance and gets the conversation rolling. Also, while recognizing that from a Sandag and every agency perspective, it's going to require funding identified somewhere to actually deliver on programs like Youth Opportunity or a low-income fare program. So,
Thank you. Board Member Joyce?
So very brief. I know
Okay.
I got kids to get to. We've never had a conversation about it here. That sounds like a fun thing to do. Can we add an agenda item in the next few?
Yeah, actually, we just had a conversation about that. We were thinking start a path and then sort of put some framework around what we would want to take to Sandag for consideration and then sort of lift that up to the board level. Or we can take it straight to the board level. The only reason I would say maybe PAF first is only because you're right, we've never talked about that. And I think we need to put a little framework around what we're trying to do and get maybe a smaller sample size of what we're really trying to accomplish before we bring it to the larger board.
I just think okay, so I'll just speak to hoping that we can have it as a board for the construct, because I think just understanding what the limitations are, because there are certain limitations on providing different fares for different people. And so I think that'd be good for everybody to understand. And then if we wanted to send PAF with some directions to work on it, that's kind of how I would see it. But I know we're having this process conversation in July too, but this is kind of like one of those things that process does matter on these things. So I'm glad awesome that y'all were already talking about it.
Yeah, I think we could do either or. I think the nuanced pieces below the surface, which I think Sandag is trying to deal with a little bit, is how do you qualify that?
Mm-hmm.
What identifiers do you use to qualify that? How often do you qualify that? We talk about that with ADA right now. Our agency does reviews of ADA approvals on our paratransit services probably a little more than most agencies do. Some people do it indefinitely, some people do it every 5 years, we do it every 3. Like, when we have those conversations internally, that's usually where things kind of, no pun intended, get off the rails a little bit. Because there's a lot of nuance issue between like, well, who's in this category and what about people who, and right, and when you talk about San Diego, what is the poverty line, right? In other areas, it might be 14,000. In San Diego, it could be 50, right? Like, there are just so many different sort of things that go into that. And I think if we're going to take that to Sandag, I think we need to be extremely specific about what our request is for a study. So that there's some guidelines around what we're asking for.
So just to be clear, like my request for a conversation is not that we would come out with an answer right at the end, but really just for us to be able to understand the scope of what
Yeah,
that
I
could
think we
be.
can do that.
And then like just kind of kick it around to see if we have an agreement among the board.
All right. Vice Chair Sinella, and then I have a bunch of questions and comments, but I'll go through them so fast.
I did have a question for Sean. Is there any risk of, if we did add this language to our recommendation, is there any risk that we could change MTS's point of view, and would that matter? if
No,
they did?
I don't think it changes MTS's perspective. The vote was not incredibly tight, but it was not, I think it was 7-4. So the main,
And 7-4 is
yeah, pretty
kind of
solid.
tight.
I thought it might have been a little closer to a 50-50. I will say that we watched all morning this morning, and we've had a lot of conversations at TC and Sandag in general. I think there are some people on MTS board that would like to see the same type of study done, and not necessarily to implement something right now, but just as a starter to, we've made there's been such an increase in everything over the past 10 years in San Diego County that we really have to sort of bring this conversation to the table. I think where it stalled was everybody has different versions of what that looks like. I don't think at all this would change MTS's sort of point of view on the outcome, because all we're really saying is we're just codifying that. Please continue your conversation about what's happening, and we will collect as a board and as an agency and provide you potential recommendations for a conversation that's in progress.
If I can add just a comment on the friendly amendment. So NCTD's board action today is recommending changes to the fair ordinance specifically. And so included in the fair ordinance, there is a chart of the fairs for the region, but there's also some of those language changes. And so for the purposes of this item, when the recommendation is made, if we had some kind of addition of studying a low-income fair, that wouldn't necessarily be included in the fair ordinance, but it sounds like.
But it would come from us. It would be an agency letter to Sandag to say, we would like to see these things happen.
So,
Right,
but
I
it'd
would-
be separate?
I would recommend some language in the motion that says, separate from the recommendation to Sandag's Transportation Committee, NCTD's board also advocates for, but ensure that they're separate, so that it doesn't seem like NCTD is making a recommendation that language in the fair ordinance is something related to a study, because I don't know that that would
That's a
be.
good point. Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate that.
Yeah, so I see some heads nodding over there. I tend to agree with Director O'Hara that this should really be handled in a separate way, but now with that clarification from Mary, I feel a little bit better about it. And really, at the end of the day, I'm not opposed to having a low income program. I think it's necessary and it's important. I don't quite fully understand how one might be implemented and what it might cost to implement one, and I think that's going to be challenging. But I think it's worthy having that conversation. I appreciate Director Joyce requesting that we put this on an agendized item in the future. My biggest concern, and I'm supportive of amending my second, but my biggest concern is we're discussing a low income program when we may not even have money to operate in the same capacity that we're operating today. And it sounds like all lines, no pun intended, all lines are kind of going down the same direction, that we're going to have to significantly reduce our services in not so distant future. And I don't only have concerns about our riders, I have concerns about our employees and about what that means to our entire region. And so I think we got to be really careful when we start adding on different programs when we don't even have the money and the funds to fund what we're doing today. And so I'll leave it at that. But I think I definitely support the amendment, just because it's so important that we adjust our rates so we can continue to provide those high-quality service that we do every single day for those who need it.
Okay, it's my turn. So I know, I just wanted to clarify from what you had shared earlier, starting with this, if we had kept up with inflation, you had mentioned that it would be between 16 to 33% that we would have seen an increase in our fares,
Yeah.
higher than what's being proposed today, yes.
If we were to have kept up over the inflation year over year from 2008 to now, what we are proposing is still 16 to 33% lower than how inflation has kept up over the past 16, 17 years.
Great, thank you. And then one of the things, I think this is maybe more of a comment, excuse, these are my notes. So with the writers that we are losing, for me, and you don't have to have an answer today, it would be helpful to know why and how and who, just because based on the conversation that we just had, it would just, as we start to map it out, it would just be beneficial for us to understand, okay, well, as we do continue to have these conversations in the future, which I would hope we have more frequently, so that we can make sure that we just are in line with, okay, this is what we want to do, and we're not having to hike up rates too high from what it's, what it was in the past. But wanted to, and it seems like maybe Yoni has an answer to this, but if we've looked at the data as to what those folks, who those folks would be, and how we can make sure we can get them where they need to be, because I'd be concerned that now all of a sudden they don't have a way to get to work or school or something to that regard.
Yeah, with the modeling that Sandag built out, it is based on fare type. So we do have the amount of ridership loss per fare type and per fare category. So that includes SDM would be broken out separately. So we can definitely provide that. All of the fare categories and kind of modes of paying had different elasticities, which we can reach out to Sandag to provide a full kind of methodology and justification for those elasticities. But it's based on how they estimate that those riders would be affected by the proportion of fare change.
Okay. I mean, I'm a data nerd, so yes, if you have any information and more drilled down information on the survey, I'd love to see it. Just because I know I asked a lot of questions on the survey during when you all presented this to us last time. The other thing that I was curious about is if we looked at the demographics and the drill down in terms of the correlations with each of these, because I know there was a question around, the income, and whether that correlates with how old somebody was. I'm just curious if there is that information that we've been looking at to really, really holistically understand who are the folks that are being impacted.
Yes, we did disaggregate all of the whether or not they prefer higher fares and whether they prefer package A and package B based on all of the demographic data that we looked at. So disaggregated by age, mode, frequency of transit use, payment type, pass type, and across all of them, I believe most opted for the higher fares and almost all opted for package B. But we can send you that disaggregated information. But yeah, definitely across the board, even when disaggregated, because that was definitely a concern of ours. We wanted to make sure that, for instance, for age type, we wanted to look at 65 plus. What did they perceive when it came to these different packages? And we actually interestingly found that they were the group with the highest proportion to support package B. And so elements like that were kind of what we looked at to make sure that, seniors weren't, didn't have a different perception for this fare update.
Okay, and then just to clarify, that makes a lot of sense. What my question was more around, for instance, I'll use my demographic, right? I fall within the 35 to 44, and then my income category, I prefer not to say, but we can, pick one. If I were in that category, those two categories, to be able to see what I would have preferred based on those two, because that to me is a more holistic picture of I remember looking at this survey and seeing the 25 to 34-year-olds, and I was excited that we actually got responses that high, because I know we haven't had that many folks respond in that demographic previously, but I'd love to know what their household income, is, and that is that potentially impacting how they're responding. And so that's kind of what I meant when I was asking about correlation. You don't have to answer right now, but I'm just curious if, as we start to talk about this and look at this, those are the types of things I'm thinking of, because it's like, how do we make sure, again, that of course, we want to make sure that the 35 to 44-year-olds are riding, but if they are in that, lower incomes category, is that impacting whether they're going to ride or not, or is it something else, or what is it, And so I think that's kind of where, for us as an agency, as we think of fare hikes and, just fare structures in the future, I'm sure there's going to be some of it that we're going to need to look at and drill down more on the data.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. I would say historically, the formula, there's like a tried and true transit formula that exists that if you raise the fares X dollars, you're going to lose X folks. I think in our current setting, what we need to do more of in our industry is who are we losing out of those categories? And some of that information is not necessarily readily in front of us.
Thank you. Yeah, and I know during our chat, one of the things that I had also mentioned, just going on the survey piece, was just how we got the data. So I know I shared that with the colleagues that were on that, but it would be helpful to know, for instance, for all of these demographics, how folks answered the survey, just for future purposes of when we do outreach. Some folks might be doing it in person, some are scanning a QR code. It's just helpful for us as we're thinking about marketing and all of those other things to bring people in. Where are they? Where are we meeting them where they're at? Let's see here. The other thing I know that we've talked about here is around how, when we adopt this, it's supposed to be a regional, effort and conversation. And the other piece that I had mentioned last time was making sure that I get that piece, but that we actually stand and advocate for North County as much as we can. We get left out of the conversation a lot of time. And I just want to make sure that I reemphasize that fact here too, that we all, of course, want North County to be represented as well as it can be. And that does mean that sometimes we might have some different opinions than our South County counterparts. And so I just want to raise that here. The last, I think I had a couple, let me see. You already talked about my thoughts around the path potentially with that low income fare conversation. As we're talking about it, and I won't go into too much detail because I know it's not agendized, but one thing that I'd like to mention is looking at a sliding scale, for instance, and then of course, like having as much information for us, like when we do discuss it in terms of if it has been implemented elsewhere, what that looks like, the funding mechanisms, all of that I feel like is going to be important. How many of our riders may potentially qualify and who it would help, and then how if it is being subsidized, how it would be subsidized. I think those things would be really important for that conversation so that we could make a well-informed decision. I 100% agree that, and I have actually asked in the past, maybe it wasn't caught during conversation, but about a sliding scale fare. So I am curious to see what that looks like. So definitely appreciate that conversation. And other than that, I think we have, unless somebody else has anything burning, we have a motion and a second on the table.
Do you want me to
Yes,
restate
please.
the motion?
Yes, thank
Okay,
you.
the motion that stands is to forward a recommendation to SANDAG to make the changes to the Regional Comprehensive Fare Ordinance outlined in Attachment A, and separately to send a letter to SANDAG advocating for a study of a low-income fare program.
Yes.
Board Member Joyce.
Are we gonna, that's a letter to SANDAG, are we not gonna inform the Transportation Committee about this at all during their conversation, so they can be aware of it? Since they're the body that's
Yes.
making that recommendation.
Board
You'll
Member
be there,
Edson is
right?
attending
I am
tomorrow.
attending and I will
So
be,
you'll loud and clear?
I will be loud and clear.
Thank you.
I know she will. I've worked with her long enough to know. Thank you, Jewel. All right, so can we call the vote? Perfect. All right, let's do it.
On the motion,
Yeah.
okay. On the motion of Board Member Edson, seconded by Vice Chair Sinella, to forward a recommendation to SANDAG to make the changes to the Regional Comprehensive Fair Ordinance outlined in Attachment A, and separately to send a letter to SANDAG advocating for a study of a low-income fair program. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion passes.
Thank you for that very robust discussion. Our last item on the agenda, and thank you, staff. Thank you so much. The last item on the agenda is our closed session. Ms. Winfrey, our Deputy CEO, Chief General Counsel, will now take us into closed session.
Yes, so we have one item today for closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9 subsection D1 related to existing litigation, Washington versus North County Transit District. The board is returning from closed session, and there is no reportable action.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Winfrey. Do we need to make any announcements about the change in the chair, or no? If it's not required, it's fine. Okay, great. Then we'll move on to the most important part of the agenda, the Chief Executive Officer's report.
I only have a few things. I'll make it quick. Tomorrow is World Public Transport Day, so please support that on your socials. We'll be throwing it out there too to all the people that left already. I pointed at them and they're not there. We talked about it a little bit already, but we went to DC and Sacramento. I think the one thing you'll see right out the gate is there is a fairly large discrepancy between the House and the Senate budget versus the president's budget. We had a lot of conversations about why that is specific to transit, but the one thing that I think everyone noted was those cuts were also to energy and water and housing and highway, and so everybody's kind of in the same boat. I think they felt really good about. Nah, just federal. I think when we sort of went to dive into it a little bit, it wasn't just one sector that was kind of hit. I mean, they all took a pretty decent hit across the board. One thing that was a little concerning is rail as a whole took about an 80% cut. The rest of transit was somewhere around the 20 to 30% range. But what we saw too was energy sector was right around 30%. Highways was right around 30%. The Highway Trust Fund, for all intents and purposes, is going to be a huge discussion item in DC, so we just need to be prepared for that. Sacramento, we're gearing up for election. We're gearing up for a lot of different changes and things that are happening. We were in DC when some other announcements were made this week that probably reshape what the governor's race looks like. So we weren't really able to have those kind of conversations with our electeds while we were there, but more to come on that. And then next month, we'll be with the budget preview for June's approval, and that is all I have unless anybody has any questions for me.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you, Sean. We'll move on to board member reports, comments, and correspondence. Do any of my colleagues have anything to report out today? I don't see anybody jumping up. Okay, and then Suhail, do we have any remaining public comments at this time?
We do not.
Okay, great. At this time, the public registration to speak on remaining public communications will end. And then just a quick announcement on our upcoming meetings. We have the Performance Administration and Finance Committee meeting on Thursday, May 21st at 11 a.m. And our regular board meeting is also on Thursday, May 21st at 2 p.m. And with that, we are adjourned.